We all want our marketing to provide us with the best return on investment. However, often marketing development is brand development that takes us years to develop. Like, for example, Volvo Cars is associated with safety. Ferrari Cars is associated with rapidity. So how does one make every dollar of marketing money bring us concrete leads? Let's listen to Dave Valentine on his entrepreneurial journey and what led him to have an unconventional marketing approach. Welcome to the Excellent Executive Coaching Podcast. I'm your host, Katrina Burrus, and today we have David Valentine. David is an expert on marketing and also an entrepreneur. Welcome, David.
Katrina, thank you so much for having me.
So, David, you're an entrepreneur and you've had quite a few challenges and successes. Please, what got you started as an entrepreneur and what were your biggest challenges?
Yeah, I think I was born an entrepreneur. My first business venture was when I was 3 years old. I started selling my pictures and paintings to friends and family members, and I actually sold quite a few. Some of the things that started happening when I started my first grown-up business at the age of 25 was I really had no idea what I was doing. Like every other entrepreneur out there, I had doing marketing in-house at different companies, had some very good experiences, but had never launched an agency and didn't really know what I was doing. I didn't know how to get clients. I wasn't sure how to bill. There's all sorts of things you try and figure out. As I grew the company really was built around my personality, my drive, my work ethic, my know-how in the marketing space. And so pretty rapidly over the course of 4 years, we were able to grow that first agency to over $1 million in revenue. And I also did that on the back of me just working myself to death, essentially to the bone, and got into a pretty bad spot at the age of 29 because I'd networked my way to that 7-figure revenue stream and had made some choices throughout the course of those first 4 years that were emotionally trying for someone who's still in their 20s.
So give us specific examples of how you overworked.
Yeah. I've always been one of those people that worked really hard. So in college, I had a couple jobs and I went to school full time. When I started the first agency, I actually kept a full-time job doing marketing in-house for a company for 18 months while I built up the business. So I would literally wake up every morning at 5. I'd work on the business until 7:30. I'd go get ready for my day job, drive into work that job from 9 to 5. Drive home, hang out with my wife and brand new baby daughter. And then about 7:30, 8 o'clock, I'd go back to working on the business. I'd work until 10 or 11, get up the next day and do it all over again. And then on the weekends, I would work Saturday and Sunday full days, just working on the business. After that 18 months, I ended up going full time with the agency, and I kept up a similar work ethic. I didn't have many weeks that I worked under 80 hours. I was going to do whatever it took to be successful, and I drove really hard. And so if you can imagine waking up early, going to have coffee with someone, an entrepreneur in town or a business owner in town, just getting to know them, trying to connect, trying to sell them on things. It wouldn't always be a sales meeting to begin with, but maybe it'd turn into one down the road. I would go from that to going to work, a full day of business and actually doing the marketing work itself, having conversations with clients, you name it. It all revolves around me, training staff. And then I'd go from that to 3 or 4 nights a week, I'd be going to networking events, right? And so I'd be hosting these networking events, going to these networking events, all sorts of interesting and fun things. However, when you're doing them week after week, day after day, and you're working 16-hour days on repeat, and then you're not taking care of yourself, which is what I was doing. My wife and I, by the time I was 29, had 2 kiddos.
Oh, wow.
we had this thriving business, but it was all centered around me. And so, I hadn't been working out. I used to work out in high school and college on a regular basis. I loved weightlifting. I was always a person who was big on prayer and meditation, and then I had stopped that. And so I had to rediscover my practices after I went to the doc at the age of 29. And he said, hey, let's do a stress test. Let's do some blood work. And so we did all that. Came back the next week, and he said, hey, Dave, how do you know you're going to have a heart attack? And I go, I don't understand what you're saying, doc. And he said, we've tested 4,500 people. You're the most stressed out person we've ever tested. You're 29 years old. If you want to walk your daughter down the aisle, if you want to see her graduate high school, you're going to have to change your lifestyle because you're not going to make it.
Oh, wow. And so, thank goodness he told you this directly.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was a blessing to go. I'm always an advocate of going to get checkups now because I'm like, you never know what your provider is going to tell you that may save your life. And so I started a journey at that point, and I really started out small, Katrina. At first, 3 days after I got out of that meeting with my doc, and he told me about this, I gave myself some goals, and they were always really simple. So at first, my goal was walk for 5 minutes outside and drink a glass of water. And I know that sounds so silly, but it was a way for me to say, as long as I get that done, then I have achieved something. Now, what ended up happening 9 times out of 10 or more was that I'd start walking for 5 minutes and I'd end up walking for 30. I wouldn't drink a glass of water a day. I'd drink 5 or 6. But I knew that I was having success if I just did the simple low-hanging fruit. And there were certainly days where I just dutifully did the walk for 5 minutes and drank the 1 glass of water, right? Other days, though, I really pushed it. And so it began this process not only for my own self-habits for rejuvenation and self-care, I also started to shift how I ran my business so that it wasn't so Dave-centric. It was process, support staff oriented. And so I started to use different language when clients would say, well, Dave, we just really want you to run our account. And I would just tell them no. I would say, look, you don't want me to run your account. What you want me to do is to be your strategic partner. And so if you have me on your account day in and day out, you're actually not going to be satisfied because that's not my forte. I'm really good to come up with strategies and big ideas, present them to you once a month or once a quarter, but really you want to have your point of contact be Derek because he's a phenomenal account manager. So I really just had to start shifting how we ran the company and how I did my self-care practices. And when I did that, I'm happy to say that I'm still alive 7 years later. And we, have gone from having one business that's doing really well to having 8, and 6 of which are doing 7 figures. So it's a good, happy story.
Yes, indeed. And that you took the great initiatives. Okay, so now you have a more balanced life. And thank you for being very specific in how you gradually acquired that balanced life. But you're in marketing, and tell us a little bit, what is your philosophy about marketing? You say that you have an unconventional approach. Can you explain?
Yeah, so it's interesting to me, Katrina. Most people, what they want to do is they want to do the low-hanging fruit of marketing. What I mean by that is a lot of companies out there have a website because you're supposed to have one. And they're not using their website in a way to drive leads for their business. And it's a mistake. I have so many conversations with entrepreneurs, with coaches, with business owners. One of my favorite questions to ask them is, hey, how many leads are you getting through your website every month? And the answer is typically 1, 2, 0. I don't really use my website for lead generation. I've never thought about using my website for lead generation. I just thought I needed to have one. And so my approach to marketing is that everything that we do needs to have a return as quickly as possible to generating a lead, which then generates a sale, right? It's really easy to think about this in terms of if you had a physical location, what would you want to have in order to justify the marketing efforts that you're doing, right? You're going to want to drive foot traffic. That's the name of the game if you have a physical retail location. And a lot of times what ends up happening for digital coaching business owners, and 7 out of my 8 companies are digital only, is that we don't think about it in another way. We just think, oh, well, I'm going to create relationships. I'm going to do some networking. I'm going to do this. And it's like, actually, if you thought about it like your website was a retail location, where would people go to check out? What's the call to action that you have for them? It's kind of easy if you're talking about an e-com site. It's a little bit more nebulous when you start to talk about a service-based company. And so we've just started to drive people to say, listen, every time that you do anything in marketing, whether that's a website or social media or a podcast or email or whatever, it has to eventually lead to, point to, generate revenue and income. And that's really the goal of all of our marketing. And it should be for every company.
So what would you say is often the other people's marketing approach and how you compare and change? Now, you've said that your website is like a store, so that to be a call to action, a checkout point and everything, which is a very good statement on your part. But let's say you also mentioned earlier that there's a difference with direct response and developing branding. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, so most marketing professionals avoid tying their efforts to any sort of direct response because it's really challenging, Katrina. It's more challenging all the time. And it's the holy grail of marketing, though. And so it takes a really talented marketer in order to elicit a direct response from someone else. So what most people do is they say, hey, listen, we're going to build a really great brand. And that's going to take 1 to 3 years of consistent work before we start to see some revenue generated from this brand work that we're doing. The reality is that that is a thing that is valuable if you're doing it in conjunction with direct response marketing. And so it's just saying that we need to have direct response play a vital role in what we're doing. It's not sales as usual anymore. No one wants to pick up their phone and talk to a salesperson that's cold called them. There's a HubSpot research paper that came out that said that 78% of business-to-business buyers prefer to be talked to and sold via email. They don't want to be sold on LinkedIn. They don't want to be sold on Twitter. They don't want to be sold on the phone. They prefer to be sold and marketed to on email. And so if you're going to do some direct response marketing for yourself, a great place to start is in the email space. And there's different tools and tricks that you can use that really optimize and maximize one of the oldest digital mediums that we have at our fingertips. And so the direct response marketing perspective is that, hey, I'm going to do these marketing efforts expecting a return on what I put out. And the branding efforts are great. I know that it's going to take a long time for those to come to fruition. So I'm not going to rely on those, and I'm not going to invest heavily in those. I'm going to invest heavily in direct response efforts every time, every day of the week, month after month.
Great. So you have a return on investment that is faster and
yes,
probably more important, and definitely in the short term. So you also comment on conscious capitalism. Can you comment on that?
Yeah. So I don't own 8 companies because I think that that's a cool number. We're just getting started. There's a fundamental conversation that I have as I travel throughout the country and the globe. Is capitalism bad? Which is a really fascinating conversation to have with people. And what ends up occurring every single time is that someone will say, well, there are people that just can't make ends meet. There are people that are making minimum wage that they can't do it. They're working 2 jobs. There are people that have been at the same company and they're not making more than 50 grand a year. And so conscious capitalism says, hey, I realize that on this level, the one that you and I are talking on right now, Katrina, we're separate beings. We're separate beings in the way that you're living your life and I'm living mine. And at another level, dare I say a higher level, we're all one thing, right? Like the universe is not two things or a bunch of things. It's one universe, and it all exists in relation to each other, right? So I don't know if you're familiar with the science of fine tuning, but it's this idea of if you take away one element of a thing that exists on Earth or around Earth or in the solar system, it would make it nearly impossible for life to exist on this planet. And yet everything has lined up essentially perfectly for life to exist and to thrive. And so conscious capitalism is a way to say a rising tide lifts all boats. And so we want to use capitalism to help people improve their standing in society, improve their personal income, and I don't need to become super wealthy in order to do that. So the goal is to have 2,000 companies employing 200,000 people 20 years from now, because we want to be so big that we are essentially like a large corporation, even though we function like a bunch of small businesses.
Okay, now define. You're a big business, but you function as a small business. Can you go into more detail?
Yeah, so if you have 2,000 companies and you have 200,000 employees, there was a brilliant study done years ago that figured out that humans essentially can only know about 100 to 150 people. So if you have more than 150 people in a company, you no longer can know everyone. Not everyone can know who you are. And there are companies, the famous one is Gore-Tex. Gore-Tex believes in this so much that they employ over 6,300 people around the globe. And when they build their factories, they only build them in such a way that 130 to 150 people could work there at most. So instead of having one large factory with 6,300 people there, or two large factories with half of the company in each, they've created these little micro factories all around the world and allow people to know each other and get to experience each other very, very well. And it adds to the culture of the company. And so essentially, we've decided that that is a beautiful model for small businesses to adopt. So if a company gets so big that they're at 150 employees, let's say, and they want to continue to grow, we would split that company in two and say, great, we're going to create a new brand. We're going to have same staff members be there. We're just going to split the staff in half, and half will go over here and half will go over there. And we'll start the thing all over again, because you spend more time at work than you do with your family.
But so Dave, so a lot of entrepreneurs will say, yes, but you're having two HRs, you're having two financial people to take care of it. So you're duplicating a lot of staff. And rationally, it's more cost. So what do you say about that?
I think it begs the question, is business fundamentally built for people, or is it built for spreadsheets? And if it's built for spreadsheets, then I am in opposition to that. If it's built for people and they're thriving, then that's where we want to play. And it's all about the human flourishing and thriving. And so I'm less concerned with just generating more and more profits. The profits are always there. And I'm more concerned with generating life-changing moments and environments for people to work. And that's really the goal.
Okay, so maybe how do you see yourself reaching that goal?
Yeah, well, I mean, we, in the past 3.5 years, we've started or acquired these 8 companies. And we continue to have success finding companies that are looking to grow rapidly. And they oftentimes need lots of marketing love and help. And so we do an acquisition, and part of the buyout is marketing services rendered. And then those companies grow quite quickly because they have figured out marketing channels that work now. So the way that we're going about it at the moment is we're creating some fantastic partnerships, but we've also spent $3 million last year. We spent $3 million on acquiring new companies, new brands, and we'll continue to do so. The companies that we have right now are profitable, and they continue to generate revenue and profit. And so that allows us to reinvest not only back into those companies, but also back into the portfolio and generating more and more revenue. And so it's a fun space to be in, and we expect that that's going to continue because we always grow. So it'll be fun.
So tell us a little bit how you work with your clients. You gave us an example that, okay, you have a partnership. And also, instead of buying cash, if I understood correctly, you give them free marketing services or sales services, a combination of all that.
Yeah. So when we work with doing an acquisition, we provide services and marketing that are going to be helpful. We do some cash infusion as well. A lot of times these companies need some additional cash help, some capital. The marketing services are part of the buyout, as in like we put a dollar amount next to them. And then we say, hey, this is what the buyout is. Here's the price. Here's what this costs. Here's how many years we're going to do it for free as part of the buyout. And that's how we work. When it comes to working with clients, essentially the way that we do client work for each of the companies is we have guarantees around services provided or results, right? Because we're direct response marketing teams. So one of the companies that I own, it books B2B meetings on people's calendars directly. And they have a yearly guarantee of meetings booked on your calendars. If they don't hit at least the minimum number of guaranteed meetings in that year's time, they will work for free for 90 days. If they still don't hit it, they'll give you a prorated amount back. So if they only booked you 80 out of the 100 meetings, you'd get the equivalent dollar amount back for those 20 meetings. Because we think that that's the best way to work with people, is to be the kinds of companies that we would want to work with ourselves, right? Be the kind of company that would actually go to bat and have a partnership with us. That's what our clients want as well. So why not create a company that does that? And again, a lot of people are afraid of that because they're unsure if they can generate results. And luckily for us, we're certain that we can. So that's typically how we work with clients.
Dave, this is very interesting. Thank you. We're coming to the end of our podcast. How can people get a hold of you?
Yeah, so they can find me online on any social media channel at RealDVal, RealDVal. I'm on TikTok, Instagram, Twitter. Anyone can find me on the internet there. The other thing that I'd love to offer up to your listeners is I usually do a workshop, Katrina, where I teach people how to create outrageous offers. It's how we scale all of our companies quite quickly, is we create offers that sound too good to be true, and they're actually not. There's something there that are very, very attainable for us to provide. And so I used to charge $2,500 to do a workshop with people. It took about 60 minutes. But what I've done is I've put together this e-course that anyone that's listening can go check out for free. You can go to davevalentine.co/OO for outrageous offer. And they can engage with the e-course material there. It takes about 60 minutes to go through it. And it'll give you a framework for how to create an offer that's so good it sells itself.
So let's say it again, davevalentine.co and then
/OO.
OO. Okay. Thank you so very much, Dave. Most interesting.
Thank you, Katrina.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Excellent Executive Coaching Podcast. You can subscribe to all future podcasts at excellentexecutivecoaching.com. Join us each Wednesday to learn more about the latest trends in leadership techniques and bring your coaching to the next level. To learn more about Dr. Burris' CEO Mastermind, use the contact form at excellentexecutivecoaching.com.